Her hands, knuckles slightly swollen, moved with the unconscious grace of deep habit. In her lap lay a mass of carded wool, soft and cloud gray. From it, she drew a thread, feeding it steadily onto the spindle suspended below her other hand. Her right hand gave the spindle a practiced flick. Whir, it sang, a soft, humming vibration that filled the space between the other night sounds. It spun, a whirling blur of dark wood, twisting the fibers into a strong, even yarn. Then, as its momentum slowed, the spindle dipped, its weighted bottom finding the packed earth floor with a gentle, definitive thud. Astrid's fingers deftly caught the yarn, guided it, drew out more wool, and flicked the spindle again. Whir thud, whir thud. This was the rhythm of the deep winter nights. The heartbeat of the longhouse when the world outside slept the sleep of ice. The other sounds were its chorus. A faint snap from the ember mound, a pocket of trapped gas, a final sigh of consumed wood. Then silence, filled only by the deep, slow breaths of the sleeping family. Olaf, her son, broad-shouldered even in repose under thick furs, snored softly, a rhythmic rumble like distant thunder. Beside him, his wife, Ellen, breathed with the light, even sigh of a summer breeze through grass. Further back, nestled like chicks, their children, young Bjorn, whose breaths were quick and shallow like a bird's, and little Sigrid, whose exhale was a barely audible puff. Even the dogs, great shaggy beasts curled near the door for extra warmth, contributed their own sonorous breathing, a comforting bass note. And always, beneath it all, the wind. But here, muffled by turf and timber and fir, it was no longer a shriek. It was a distant sigh, a vast exhalation of the frozen world, pressing against their sanctuary but unable to penetrate. Ho! S-H-H-H-H-H, it sighed against the roof. A reminder, not a threat. The cold outside wasn't just weather, it was a living, breathing beast. It howled down from the ice-locked mountains, scoured the frozen fjord, and flung itself against the longhouse with the fury of a thwarted giant. But here, inside the belly of the great timbered beast, warmth reigned. Not the boisterous, leaping warmth of a summer bonfire, but the deep, patient, old warmth of embers and earth and shared breath. Thick, overlapping furs, bear, wolf, reindeer, hung heavy over the doorway and lined the walls, swallowing the wind's sharpest claws. The air itself felt thick, saturated with the perfume of survival, the rich, ancient scent of wood smoke, deep and comforting as a mother's embrace, the sharper, greener tang of dried herbs, thyme, yarrow, mugwort, hanging in bunches from the rafters like forgotten charms, the underlying musk of cured leather, wool, and the simple, clean smell of packed earth beneath worn floorboards. At the heart of it all, the hearth. No roaring blaze tonight, not with precious wood stacked carefully against the far wall. Instead, a low mound of embers pulsed like a sleeping dragon's heart. Deep ruby reds faded into ashen gray at the edges, radiating a heat that was less fire and more earth core. It was a contained sun, its warmth soaking into the large, smooth stones encircling it, stones that had known generations of such fires. That heat didn't dance, it settled. It seeped into bones, loosened muscles clenched against the outer world, and painted rosy shadows on the faces of the sleepers. Astrid sat closest to this pulsing heart. Her chair, worn smooth by decades of use, was positioned just where the radiant heat kissed the skin but didn't scorch. She was the longhouse's own steady ember. Silver hair, once the color of ripe wheat, was braided tightly and wound around her head like a crown. Lines mapped her face, tracks worn by laughter, worry, wind, and time. But her eyes, reflecting the ember light, held a calm watchfulness. The whir became softer, longer, the thud more distant. She drew out the wool more slowly, the thread almost spinning itself now, guided by muscle memory deeper than conscious thought. Olaf's rumbling snore hitched, then settled into a deeper, slower rhythm. Ellen sighed, a sound of pure comfort. Bjorn mumbled something unintelligible, lost in a dream of summer adventures. Sigrid was utterly still, a small, warm lump under the furs. The dogs heaved a collective, contented sigh. Astrid's head nodded forward, just slightly. Her hands stilled completely, the spindle resting against her thigh, the half-spun yarn a soft loop between her fingers. The whir thud ceased, but the rhythm didn't die. It deepened. It became the synchronized breath of the sleeping family. Olaf's rumble, Ellen's sigh, Bjorn's murmur, Sigrid's puff, the dog's sonorous breath. It became the slow, almost imperceptible sigh of the wind against the turf. It became the silent, radiant pulse of the embers, glowing steadily in their bed of ash. It became the very heartbeat of the longhouse, strong and steady, holding the warmth, holding the life, holding the quiet against the frozen dark. Astrid slept, upright in her chair, bathed in the ember glow, her face relaxed, a small smile touching her lips. The keeper rested, but the hearth kept its rhythm. The warmth held. The sanctuary remained. The deep winter night flowed on, outside the firs and timber, but here, within the embrace of the stones and the shared breath, there was only peace, spun as fine and strong as the wool in the elder woman's lap, woven into the unending rhythm of home. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of warmth, full of safety, full of the deep, slow pulse of life cherished and guarded. The longhouse dreamed, and its dreaming heart beat steadily, a breath in, a breath out, the embers glowing like watchful eyes in the dark. And in her own hands, spinning the summer's wool into winter's warmth. A soft whimper came from Sigrid's nest. The little girl stirred, a small hand flailing out from under the furs. Astrid paused her spinning, the spindle hanging silent. She didn't rise immediately, just watched. Ellen murmured in her sleep, a comforting sound, and shifted instinctively closer to her daughter. Sigrid sighed, a tiny, shuddering breath, then settled, her small fist relaxing, disappearing back into the warmth. The rhythm of her breathing resumed its soft puff. Astrid waited a few heartbeats longer, then, satisfied, gave the spindle another flick. Whir thud, peace restored. The watch continued. Time stretched, elastic and dreamlike, measured only in the fall of the spindle and the gradual deepening of the ember's glow. The wind's sigh seemed to soften further, as if even the storm beast was lulled by the rhythm within. The longhouse felt less like a structure and more like a living creature, breathing slowly, contentedly, in its den. The heat from the stones was a physical embrace. Astrid felt a profound contentment settle over her, as thick and warm as the furs. It wasn't the sharp joy of summer, but the deep, slow satisfaction of purpose fulfilled, of sanctuary maintained. This was her place, her meaning, to be the still point, the warm center, the keeper of the rhythm while the world raged. Her eyelids grew heavy. The whir, thud, began to blend with the rhythm of her own pulse, the sigh of the wind, the deep breaths of her family. The ember lights swam before her eyes, painting patterns on the inside of her lids, dancing flames that weren't there, memories of brighter fires, faces of those long gone, yet whose presence still lingered in the scent of the herbs, the grain of the wood, the very rhythm she maintained. She didn't fight the drowsiness. It was part of the watch too, this gentle yielding, trusting the warmth and the safety to hold. Her hand slowed, a scent woven into her very being. Her gaze drifted to the herbs hanging above. Time for strength, yarrow for healing wounds both seen and unseen, mugwort for dreams and protection. She was the keeper of these too, the rememberer of the old ways, the one who knew which leaf eased a cough, which poultice drew out fever. The knowledge felt like another layer of warmth, another shield against the harshness outside. Ellen was learning, her hands quick and clever, but the deep lore, the songs whispered over the remedies, that was Astrid's domain, passed down like the spinning skill, like the rhythm of the hearth. A larger ember collapsed inwards with a soft crunch, sending up a brief constellation of orange sparks that winked out before they reached the smoke-blackened rafters. The light dimmed momentarily, then settled into a deeper, redder glow. Astrid didn't stir to add wood. Not yet. The embers held enough heat for hours yet. Conservation was its own rhythm, as vital as the spinning. Where thud, the sound was hypnotic. Astrid felt her own breathing begin to sync with it. In where out thud, in the stillness, amplified by the muffled world outside, the rhythm became the world. It was the pulse of the longhouse, the slow heartbeat of the family within, the counterpoint to the wind's sigh. She thought of the summer just past, fleeting but fierce, the long days of light, the smell of salt and fish by the fjord, the laughter of the children running barefoot through tall grass. She thought of the autumn harvest, the frantic race against the coming dark, the smell of earth and ripe grain. All that energy, that light, that abundance, was stored here now. In the dried fish and meat hanging in the smoke shed, in the sacks of grain and roots, in the stacked firewood, and in this very warmth radiating from the stones. It was stored in the quiet strength of Olaf's sleep, in Ellen's capable hands, in the boundless potential of Bjorn's dreams and Sigurd's laughter. Astrid's hands moved, were thud, her gaze soft, not truly focusing on the wool or the spindle, but on the ember light playing on the faces of her family. This was her watch, her vigil. While the fierce world outside held its breath in ice, she kept the inner flame alive. Not just the fire in the hearth, but the quieter fire of safety, of continuity. Memories drifted like smoke on the warm air. She remembered her own grandmother, fingers just as gnarled, spinning in this very spot, the same were thud a lullaby to Astrid's childhood. She remembered winters fiercer than this, when the wind found chinks and the frost painted patterns inside the walls, and the embers had to be guarded like the last coals of life itself. She remembered Olaf as a boy, smaller than Bjorn is now, wide-eyed at the storm's fury, calmed only by this rhythm, by her low singing, by the sheer, unshakable presence of the hearth and the woman who tended it. The wool under her fingers was from their own sheep, shorn last spring, washed in the icy stream, carded by Ellen's patient hands on long autumn evenings. Each thud of the spindle was another length of warmth created, another strand of resilience woven against the cold yet to come. It was practical, yes, socks, tunics, blankets, but it was also prayer, a meditation in fiber and motion. With each twist of the spindle, she felt she was spinning not just yarn, but time itself, drawing the peaceful present out against the howling future, anchoring her family in this moment of warmth and safety. She shifted slightly, her old bones appreciating the deep, penetrating heat from the stones. The warmth wasn't superficial. It sank in, easing the perpetual winter ache in her joints. She inhaled deeply, the complex perfume of the longhouse filling her lungs, smoke, herbs, the faint sweetness of dried apples stored overhead, the warm animal scent of the dogs, the simple smell of her own family. It was the smell of home,